Meet Big Ed. He has a tax-funded taste for children. Big Ed knows that the best grooming starts early. He has a plan for your preschoolers, a plan to gender confuse your grade schoolers. But if you think his grooming stops there, you have not been paying attention. Big Ed wants to liberate your daughters from old-fashioned ideas like, well, you already know. Big Ed has dorm rooms ready for you in prison buildings of learning, and professors standing by dedicated to grooming young adults in doubt and unbelief. After all, he is the gatekeeper of this brave new world, and if you want a job, you'll need to pay him with years of your life for a permission slip. Yeah, whatever. You think David paid Goliath for a certificate in giant management before those two squared off? Did Luther major in theses? Was George Washington summa cum laude in empire repellents, while Jefferson focused on ag with a minor in declarations? When the world needs saving, meaningful vocations abound for those who are truly prepared. And the truth is, despite Marxist advances, this is still America, and Big Ed is still a voluntary opt-in. So don't. Not at any level. Not preschool, not middle school, not college. It isn't complicated. When Big Ed offers you free candy, stay away. You'll thank us later. We know it's crazy, but run with us here. Men and women were created in the image of God. You don't need a government certificate of faux learning for personal validation or permission to work. You were born with divine permission to pursue knowledge and understanding, truth, goodness, and beauty. And at New St. Andrews College, we are committed to helping students do just that, to their fullest potential. In an age dominated by chaos, when learning is on a choke leash controlled by Big Ed and his many strange friends, ours is an education for outlaws, an education for men and women committed to building a beautiful and free society in the ruins of the Western world. When thinking is outlawed, only outlaws will think. Yes, Big Ed hates what we do, but his hatred brings us joy. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for outlaws. Mind, body, and soul.
It is the duty of the free man to resist tyranny at every turn. Every man will either watch his freedom stripped away or take action to protect what he loves. Introducing the A3, the newest revolutionary body armor from Armored Republic. The A3 is the new standard for lightweight multi-hit body armor. A3 plates are incredibly light at 4.6 pounds. The patented design captures fragmentation while remaining multi-hit capable. The A3 will stop up to M80 ball, yet comes in at only 0.7 inches thick. The A3 is the thinnest NIJ .06 compliant or certified composite standalone plate that includes the drop test. The A3 is the first of its kind, patent pending, that combines an alloy strike face with polyethylene backing, revolutionizing body armor technology by providing strength and durability while remaining sleek and maneuverable. The A3 is the new standard in lightweight body armor. The fight against tyranny just got stronger.
Is that good for your ears?
It's a little loud.
Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
You know, live audio testing. Hey, y'all, welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. We are just 10 days away from the start of our conference. We want some more volume up. I'll give you more volume. I got volume over here. My voice is struggling. But this is me after a bad week.
Oh, this is you better.
Pretty much every show last week I recorded sick and hacking and coughing. Or I didn't really hack in public, but or on the show. But
you're the Marlboro man.
It was it was a brutal, just head cold of a week last week, and getting over it still. So, well, thank you guys for joining us. We're actually very excited.
10 days to Fight Laugh Feast.
10 days to Fight Laugh Feast
in Fort Worth, Texas.
We'll be on the ground. Actually, we get there Tuesday night. Are you coming Tuesday night?
I'm coming Wednesday.
You're coming with Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
On Wednesday.
Nice little time with Jenny.
Yeah.
That's fun. I'm bringing my kids. My wife and kids will be coming on Thursday.
Okay.
But I'll be flying in. Knox, all our staff coming in on Tuesday night.
Okay.
And hit the ground running on Wednesday.
And we have there's a dinner Wednesday night.
There's a corporate partner dinner for our corporate partners who support us in our show on Wednesday night.
And then we kick off Thursday.
Yep, Thursday. We got the pre-business conference.
Oh, pre-business.
Don't forget that. Beer and Psalms. And Beer and Psalms, as we already mentioned.
Who's at the business conference?
So we got to talk about that.
Uh-oh. We're going to have a business meeting right now. Uh-oh.
Wednesday morning.
Okay, all right.
And then the live, actually the Beer and Psalms is going to be open to the public this year, which is super exciting. We actually got a lot of fun feedback on that.
Yeah.
And, all our corporate partners and vendors are going to be there. Yeah. It's just a good group, good fun, good time.
Friday morning, conference kicks off.
That's right.
Very good.
Friday night is the singles mixer.
Ooh.
But you got to be there to know where you're going to go.
Right, because we're not announcing that on there.
No, that's dumb.
Yeah.
I don't want no dumb single dudes coming.
So we got bouncers.
No fatheads.
Yeah. Come register, and we got people sizing you up, deciding whether or not to tell you about the singles event.
That's right. We're watching. Netflix put out this series on White Earp.
Oh yeah.
Oh, 5 episodes or something.
Okay.
But actually, it's really good.
Okay.
But they're talking about how White Earp preferred to fist fight than to shoot people.
Yeah.
He just walk up to someone and just bam, knock him. So we're gonna have a White Earp bouncer there.
All right. Okay. All right. Our friends at Backwards Planning Financial are giving away one custom engraved Mont Blanc pen to a loyal Pub TV subscriber. So if you're a subscriber to our Fight Laugh Feast Club, the Pub TV, they're going to give away this fancy. Oh, look, there's a picture. Fancy pen. To one of you subscribers at the end of this year. We're drawing one name at random twice each month to be entered to win. This month's entry is, there's the drum roll, Mark Wandre.
Is that how you?
I don't know. Mark Wandre.
Hey, way to go, Mark. So he's going in the drawing for the pen in December.
Right. So you got the drawing this month. Okay. You're one of the winners, and you don't need to do anything, Mark, except listen in December to see if you're the big winner. Mm-hmm. Jesus is Lord in public and in private. Every area of life must be subject to his lordship, and our use of technology is no exception. What captures our attention on the screen either glorifies or dishonors our Lord. That's why accountable to you, that's the word accountable, the number 2, the word you, is committed to promoting biblical accountability in our families and churches. Their monitoring and reporting software makes transparency easy on all your devices. So you can say with the psalmist, I will not set anything worthless before my eyes. Guard against temptation with accountable to you and live for God's glory. Learn more. Try it for free today at accountable2you.com/FLF. Again, that's the word accountable, the number 2, the word you.com/FLF. We're grateful to have with us today live via Zoom or whatever technology we're using. Mr. Stephen Wolfe, Dr. Stephen Wolfe, the good doctor, completed his PhD in political philosophy at LSU in 2020. He's a member of the James Madison Society at Princeton University, but don't hold that against him. He has several years of teaching experience, including college level and online teaching, and has published many academic and popular articles. The bio doesn't even say he's like most famous. He's the author.
His most famous book.
Like the godfather of Christian nationalism, the case for Christian nationalism. He was born and raised in Napa, California. Again, don't hold that against him. He's from California, but he's repenting. He currently lives in North Carolina with his wife and his 4 kids. Stephen, thanks for joining us again on Cross Politic.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again. It's great.
Absolutely. I think the most controversial question I'm going to ask.
Okay,
Steve,
right now.
Right here.
Okay.
You always start off with the best, right?
Yeah.
Knox teaches us.
Yeah, you're gonna
lead with your best.
You're going to do a Wyatt Earp and punch
No. I can do that. Stephen, are you voting for Trump or Kamala?
Oh, that's a tough question. Wow. No, Trump all the way. That'll be the 3rd time. So
man, he's
every time is better than the previous one. So this will be good.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we ought to just for now on, just the background of our show should have Trump serving McDonald's. Right?
I know.
Just from here on out to the end of the election. Just
And did you hear?
What more do you need?
He said, "I've now worked 30 minutes for McDonald's longer than Kamala Harris ever has," because she said she used to work at McDonald's, which wasn't true.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So, a few weeks ago, I don't even know when it was, and as we were getting ready for the feed, we mentioned, like, we're going to bring up the tweet, and Stephen's like, what tweet?
We both have forgotten about this conversation.
I found the tweet. Actually,
I didn't even read the tweet. I just wanted to be on the show. Yeah. So I just tweeted out, invite me in the show. And so here I am.
It's been a while. And Stephen's like, hey, this is just another way to ask to get back on.
Stephen, you should always do that.
Exactly.
Just for the record.
I've done that dozens of times. Good. And you guys are the first people to take me on the offer. So I appreciate that.
You are always welcome back.
Yeah,
we'd love to talk to you anytime. Actually, I've been sort of slowly picking away at a little bit of an article that I actually posted this morning, trying to explain a little bit of this tweet that I posted, which may or may not be at all interesting to you. But the tweet was, the multicultural globalists want to blend all cultures into a bland humanism. But the blood and soil types end up insisting on superficial divisions. Covenant is the key to an earthy and biblical unity and diversity, or what we might call a Protestant feudalism and Christendom. And this was not aimed at anyone in particular. This is just me getting up in the morning and chewing on things and occasionally having a random thought that I want to share with the world. But I think there is a whole bunch of churn and discussion going on in the social medias and conference and et cetera, about the way forward. You're a part of this conversation, Stephen, with your book and various speaking opportunities and so on. But it seems to me that there is this a healthy reaction to what I'm describing, this sort of humanistic multicultural globalism. That is this
melting pot.
Yeah, and it has a number of different manifestations, but is it's trying to engineer humanity into whatever the next Darwinian stage is. It thinks that it can just blend cultures and that we can somehow be united by just ideas. And I think a lot of Christians have gone along with this for a long time. And there's a bunch of conservative Christians waking up and saying, wait a second, no, there's more to being human than just ideas. We are human beings. We're placed in families and cultures, and we live in particular places. These things matter. You talk about this a fair bit in your book, A Case for Christian Nationalism. But I think at the same time, there are some people that I would say are overreacting and doing this sort of some kind of neo blood and soil thing. And now the center is blood. The center is this particularism, rather than what I would argue for is, I think the way that we counteract sort of both extremes is via covenant. Covenant is not just idea. Covenant is bond in history. And there are different covenants. There are different kinds of covenants. Marriage covenant, which it gives us family and tribe and so on. But then you have civil covenants working their way out more broadly from city, state, all the way up to nation. And I think more broadly, you can have a kind of globalism defined carefully biblically under a Christendom. And so, anyways, there's just a couple of ways of trying to frame what I was getting at. And then you responded to the tweet. Again, maybe you just wanted to come on the show, but
you said I'd love to come on.
You said I'd like to talk to you guys about this. And so here we are. And I don't know if that pushes any of your buttons, Stephen, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, yeah, I was joking before. Yeah, I love talking about these things. And so I agree that you can take blood and soil too far when you base your society purely on genetics and DNA. So you get an ancestry.com and you realize who your people are. It's like, turns out you're half Irish and half German. And so you're split between those two ancestral lands and you don't know who you are. So I think that's where things can go wrong. I agree with you on the globalism and the type of, just pure humanity, interchangeable humans in any state. You can move here or there and there's no difference. So I agree with you on that's all false. But I would push back against the term blood and soil, the use of it the way you did, because I think I think there's actually some good in the denotation of the words. And there's actually truth there. And Gabe actually highlighted it when he said that his roots are in Dallas, Fort Worth. That's kind of along the lines of what I mean there, that there is a type of place and blood relations there that makes that place meaningful to him. So the first thing is just rhetorically, I think using that, it's like akin to like transphobia, like using the word transphobia, homophobia. I know they're not the same thing, but it's similar in this sense in that it kind of means whatever someone wants it to mean. It's just this wide, kind of broad use term, catch-all term to attack whatever I don't like. And but I think what happens is there's a casualty, in that use of the phrase blood and soil. And because I think we can use it, there's a difference between like the denotation and the connotation. So the connotation is Nazis, and the connotation is, sort of a ethno-nationalism and violence and that kind of thing. But I think it just in terms of the words itself, it's just simply the case that we have a special feeling towards places in which our blood relations were there. So you think of grandparents' house, great grandparents' house. Think of the town you were from or the city you were from, that your ancestors go back generations who did various things there and built this or built that or did this great act or whatever. They just did their mundane life in those places, and that matters to us. And it's attached to the place, and it's like our love for them is made alive by it, even when we're gone. So if your grandparents have passed, you can still look fondly upon the house and the land and anything else that they existed on or labored on or whatever. And so that's a type of like blood and soul relationship. And so I think it's important that we attack, I guess, the connotation, but not in doing that lose the goods involved. And I think that extends out to nation itself, that your people go back, generations in this place and died and fought in various conflicts and struggles that were part of that nation. And so I think we shouldn't lose the concepts for fear of getting kind of entangled in the connotations.
Yeah, Stephen, I got a broader question here.
Look, man, you can't talk.
I know, I barely can. And this is pretty wide open, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because Toby's specifically trying to, I think, use the word covenant as kind of like part of the solution here.
Right. So I actually want to, like, the good part of good and soil that I think what you're describing, I want to say, there's something there that I agree with. But the thing that I'm saying, I guess the way to solve that problem, you're saying there's unhelpful connotations, but there's good denotations. How do we split that baby, so to speak? How do we get a hold of that? And I would argue, isn't covenant the mechanism by which we can do that? So I'm part of what I'm thinking is, as you're talking, I'm saying, yes, there are good things that we ought to remember and honor, but there's also bad stuff back there. It's not just all one thing. And so it's not morally neutral. There's some stuff that we're repenting of and we're trying to leave behind. And there's some stuff that we want to honor. And that's all bound up in, covenant obligations.
Like in Texas, they took the sugar cane out of the Dr. Pepper. I mean, they should repent of that. So never mind.
But I mean, you are actually far more well read in covenant, history of covenant theology, I'm guessing, than I am. In 16th, 17th century, I just finished finally reading Glenn Moot's book on the way that covenant played such a actually very significant role in the developing political theologies of the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries. It seems to me that there's a strong historical precedent for that gives us the right kind of blood and soil. Honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and at the same time gives us some of the safeguards.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on what you mean exactly by like a political covenant. So there's obviously like theological covenants that relate to salvation and eternal life and all that. So, but you mean like a political covenant, and I guess it would depend. To me, would depend on, like, it seems like it's similar to like a social contract, but it's religious. And so what I've claimed for a long time is that the society or the nation should have some, at the very least, broad cultural unity, or some sort of cultural reference points that unite around. And I don't think that can be purely a religious one, because Christianity is a universal religion. So if the covenant, if it's like a political covenant, and the ground of it is that we're all Christians and you're in, you're out if you're a Christian or not, then I don't think that that's sufficient. But if it is a covenant that is more than just theological, but it's also, I would say political. You guys might not like that distinction, but if it's in addition to religious, but it's also a political or kind of a social covenant, then I'd be on board with it. So that's my only concern, is I just don't think we should say that if you're a Christian, you're in, but if you're not a Christian, you're out, because I think there's more to life in this world than sharing, like I've said, sharing the highest good. You need to share lesser goods, a way of life, a common history in the place, things that are not in themselves Christian or religious,
right?
But still unite people around kind of a shared set of practices and customs. And
yes. Yeah. So I would say it seems to me that and I don't actually have a problem with the idea of a political covenant. And I would say national covenants could be as natural as marriage covenant. So you don't have to be a Christian to enter into the marriage covenant. And a marriage covenant is objectively what God made it. It's part of the it's part of the nature of the world. It's one man, one woman, and there are covenant obligations just embedded in the nature of it. And I would say that I think there are certain analogous ways in which nations are formed around covenants. They're ultimately, I would say, are under God, because God made the world and we're made in his image. But I don't think that national covenants have to necessarily be explicitly Christian or explicitly religious. So our federal nation is, sort of barely Christian, in terms of its explicit acknowledgement of God, even though the states have a lot more explicit references to the Christian God. But I think you could have multiple kinds of political covenants, national covenants, that are technically ultimately under God because it's his world. You want to use the word natural law, that kind of, in that sense. There's an objectivity that it exists, and there's certain obligations to basic morality that all nations really do have because of the way God made the world. I would say it's stronger than social contract because I think it is ultimately under God, whether they acknowledge there is a God or not, because there is a natural law and therefore there's a natural law giver. So I think it can, just like anybody can get married, anybody in a nation is ultimately under some kind of agreement under the Creator God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So you would say that the U.S. is under a sort of covenant via the Constitution, yes. Just so I understand fully.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I mean, I would agree with that. I think there's a case of you using like different terminology that I'm not that I don't use, and so I think yeah, that makes sense. So like covenant would be that, all nations are under God in some sense, even if they're not, if it's not acknowledged exactly explicitly.
Exactly.
And so then all basic, the basic, like architecture, political architecture of your life together, which for us is kind of the Constitution.
Right.
That would be a sort of covenant. But I think you would say then that like the perfect political covenant would be one that explicitly acknowledges the lordship of Christ, yes. Right? So in a way, any nation can have a legitimate covenant, and it order itself according to it. But in order for it to be actually complete and perfected and proper, it would explicitly acknowledge the lordship of Christ.
Yes. Yes.
And I've said like that. I always say it was a complete mistake that the founders didn't do that. There were objections before it was ratified that they said that yes, it should have, it should acknowledge Christ, and they just didn't want to go back and go through the struggle to produce a new one.
Right.
But anyway, So I think we agree.
I would say like it's in the same way that like again the same thing would be said about marriage, a marriage covenant. Any unbelievers could enter into a true marriage covenant. They really are married.
But that's because God defined marriage.
Right. But the highest form of marriage is a marriage that acknowledges the lordship of Christ. over that marriage, because it really does reflect the Christ and the church, regardless of whether they, those two pagans acknowledge that or not. So again, it's sort of an analogous, sense. The highest form of it would be one that is fully Christian and acknowledges Christ.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to the fact that, like you said, there can be a nation that is not Christian. It's a true nation. It's under God. And if that nation were to convert to Christ, it still remains a nation as it is.
Right.
It still has its common history. It's things that they did that were good, and things that they did that were evil. And common ancestry and all that, and they can see the good in their pagan ancestors even when they see the evil.
Right.
But then once they become Christian, they remain what they were in a way, but then they correct the error, and they, in a way, like, it's, I guess the Thomistic language would be that they become in a way perfected in form. Right. They now are the true. They've brought their covenant into a type of completeness. Now they're a complete nation as a Christian nation.
Yeah, and I think Stephen, part of how we frequently use the word covenant on the show, we don't use it just in terms of like God's covenant with us, but because God covenants with us, we can covenant with each other. And so it's kind of the same, it's kind of operating and functioning off the same definition of kind of the Westminster, where a covenant is a solemn bond with blessings and cursings associated with it. And so a city could have that same kind of solemn bond, and if you disobey it, you get kicked out of the city, and if you obey it, you get the blessings of participating in this covenant within the city.
Well, and I want to add to that, though, that at the same time there's a base level of, even before God, like a nation that's sacrificing humans to their false gods,
right?
Even if it's a total pagan, it's Incas. Whatever.
They're still disobeying God.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're going to be under the curse of the creator God,
right?
Even though they're worshiping some false god and think that they're doing him service by sacrificing all these humans.
Right. So I guess I'm just pointing out that, like, Stephen, we're taking kind of that, our operating definition is kind of broadly speaking, pulling from, the Westminster, and that's how we would think of it as, a marriage. It has blessings and cursings in that covenant. A city has blessings and cursings in their covenant. And I guess this is why, to me, I think it's helpful to think in terms of covenant instead of just in terms of, soil and people in Dallas, Texas, or Fort Worth, Texas, whatever, is because it helps us back out of the multiculturalism that this modern multiculturalism I reject. It's crazy. It's subjective. There's no desire for foundational truth in it. But it also allows a people to course correct and say, yeah, I'm moving to Moscow, Idaho because I love their covenant community there.
Or repenting and leaving, California and going to North Carolina.
Yeah, that's right. Like Napa Valley, But you can go to a place where, these people agree on the direction they want to go as a city.
I was thinking about, in this article I posted today, I thought about just Ruth joining Naomi. It's sort of this one of these places in Scripture where you have this foreigner who takes this sort of covenant-like vow to stay with Naomi. Naomi says, go back to your people, go back to your gods, and the other daughter-in-law does, but Ruth says no.
Your God will be my God.
Yeah, your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. Where you die, I will die. And I think that sort of expresses again the right kind of blood and soil. But it's also showing how it's not a static wooden reality. There's marriage. There is immigration. There is joining the covenant. You're right. There has to be a center, and that's part of the problem with multiculturalism is they think they can just sort of
their center is power.
Yeah, that's it. Create this humanistic bland center, and that's obviously not working, and it would never work. But I think covenant provides the biblical category, and I think even in a historical category for a true center, cultural center, which is going to often have a kind of homogeneity over time, but at the same time, it's not wooden, it's not static, and so people can join, people can leave, people can immigrate, people can get kicked out, and again, I think that maybe provides some of the protections against some of those the Nazi connotations, the racist connotations, the kinist connotations, but it says, I mean, are we to love our people? Yes. Are we to love our land? Yes. But there's also some checks on it because covenantally, again, if we're, as we zoom in, so I don't think of this as like multiple levels of covenant, but you have your family, you have your local church, you have your local community, but, you have different obligations and duties and different relations
in each covenant.
And so, if a near kinsman of mine apostatizes, they're still my kinsman. But now I have, there's different
no longer a brother in Christ.
There's different obligations there, than there were when they were in Christ. And that doesn't dissolve those connections, those blood connections, but, it does relativize them to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, the order of love's discussion, it's very difficult because, I think it becomes very difficult when you have a child that apostatizes. So it's like, how do you relate to that person? But I agree that that a community, or, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of nations, that it ought to be hospitable, or it ought to practice hospitality such that outsiders can come in, on the condition that the outsiders want to make, your people their people, right? Mm-hmm. So they are entering, knowing that there's difference, knowing that they are different, and that they want to enter into a community and begin the best they can to assimilate into those practices. I don't think most people can actually achieve that in their lifetime, but their children, grandchildren will. Just like you said, I'm from California. I haven't lived there in many years, but now we live in the South, and my desire is that I don't think my kids will have a Southern accent, but I do desire that my children will have Southern accents when they come home.
You should just start talking that way, speed up the process.
I do a little bit, but it just sounds too ironic and I can't do it. But,
start laughing.
I agree. I do think, it should be something where it's difficult to leave just because it's so familiar and it's your home. And I think that's just normal for everyone. It's hard to leave your hometown. It's hard to leave your nation. Just try living in a foreign country for a while and you realize that I kind of want to go back. Mm-hmm. I met someone in Italy when I was there a few months ago, and she said something like, I moved to Italy when I was like 5 or 6. And she's like, I really want to go back to the United States because that's my home. I was like, okay.
Wow.
So it's very interesting. There still is. I even know someone who, his father's Welsh, and he was born in the United States, and he feels like Wales is home. So there's all these weird dynamics when it comes to home with your, various relations. But anyway, the point being is that we have these attachment to places, and we should allow people to come in on the condition that you're going to essentially become one of us and not be perpetual strangers, pretty much, and certainly not try to subvert the way of life, even if you think it's odd or weird or perhaps even wrong in a certain respect.
Stephen, and again, this is where I feel like the covenant, the terminology covenant, and kind of the concept of covenant is helpful. Yeah. When I think of like my allegiances, rightly ordered, obviously first my allegiance to God, and then I'd say next my allegiance is to my wife because I covenanted with her,
right?
And then, and of course, this is not all hierarchical. Then I have a covenant with my church because I became a member, and I promised to be a member in good standing at King's Cross. My kids are part of the covenant I made with my wife. And then my city, I feel like maybe fourth on my list in terms of my allegiances would be my city. And of course, again,
because they're your neighbors though, right around you.
They're my neighbors right around me. And again, I don't even want to act like I'm trying to frame this in like a hierarchical way. Because sometimes the church, if I'm in sin, the church needs to come after me. So there's ways that can be played around with. But when a Christian comes into my city and is part of the covenant body of Christ, I see that as my allegiances are closer to that person coming into my city than, let's say, my allegiances to my neighbor who's not a Christian next door. I don't know, just trying to push some of this conversation into the corners. Does that make sense what I'm trying to illustrate there?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you live as well. So if you live in a place, I wonder, like the people, I kind of live in that place where there's a lot of people who are very culturally Christian and nominally Christian.
Oh yeah.
And to my mind, I want to treat them not as Christian, as Christians in the sense of being united to Christ, but in a way that in a quasi way that they're Christians. In other words, we have around us a Christian culture that has prepared them for Christianity. So there is that dynamic too. And you just, so you want to maintain that good in that community. So I understand what you say. There's been debates for like millennia about, is your first commitment to your nation or to your family? And those, so it's, I don't know. I mean, you have to think if you go to war for your nation and you die, you're laying a lot of trouble upon your own family.
Right.
Because now you don't have anything to bring home. You're not working. And so in a way you're fighting and dying for your country, which is recognized as a good patriotic act, but at the same time you're causing a lot of trouble and in a way bad to your closer relations. So it is, I think it's a very complicated subject. I don't have like all the answers. I've thought about it, but I haven't been able to write anything that satisfied me on it. I guess I just know that there's these various duties that we have to the various spheres and relations in our life. And sometimes they seemingly conflict, and it's not hard to put them all in a row, and in a clear hierarchy. Because I do wonder, like, if we said, okay, all Christians are allowed, I'm not saying you guys are saying this, but any Christian in the world can come to our state or our nation, and we have a higher duty to them than our kind of nominally Christian neighbor. It just makes me wonder, is it good to bring about a sort of multiculturalism, or like a multicultural nation, to love a fellow Christian in Africa or Asia or anywhere else in South America? With the consequence being that we kind of undermine a way of life for that's been generated over generations and generations. It's just, I mean, I think that issue is like very difficult and complicated. I don't think it's as easy as people often think it is. So anyway, yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't have solid answers. I think your point about hospitality is a good one, because I think it actually, like, obviously it's not exactly the same, but I think it's analogous to like my family's hospitality. We, have people over into our house, and at some point,
you tell them to leave.
Well, there's that too. That's not what I was going to say, but like there are limits. Like if at some point, if my house is full, I'm not being hospitable anymore. If I
add another 5 people to the room.
When my wife and I are discussing having people over, like I always want to invite another family or 2 more families. And my wife's like, I think we're going to be out of chairs. And, like there's not going to be breathing room. And she's got a good point. And it's like, yeah, at some point it's not hospitable anymore. And so I think in an analogous way, a nation, a city, a state has to think through,
what they can handle.
What can we actually realistically handle in a way that, doesn't overwhelm, your ability, in Titus 3, Paul tells Titus to be teaching the Christians in Crete that they need to be known for maintaining good works, and it's one of those things where I think sometimes our Christian brains just kind of go straight to like helping little old ladies over across the street or whatever, which is that's a great good work. But maintaining good works, he says Christians should study to maintain good works, which I take to mean that means you have to be thoughtful about the sustainability of your ability to give. And so we ought to be given to good works, but you also got to be thinking in terms of, can I keep giving this good work? And so that, that includes things like, how how many children can you care for well?
Yeah.
We're to love children. We're to welcome children. We're to be those kinds of people. We're to think of children as this great heritage and gift from the Lord.
Yeah.
But you also need to feed them and clothe them and provide good Christian education to them. And I think there are other ministries like that where people, I don't think, are obeying that apostolic command to study to maintain their good works. They're just, sometimes with good intentions and sometimes with bad intentions, are trying to guilt people into just give, open.
Right.
And now people end up, it's like in the name of diaconal ministry, you're on the deacons list.
Yeah.
In the name of, I've sometimes said with, ministry to orphans and widows, the first rule is first do no harm. First, don't create new orphans and widows.
Yeah.
And oftentimes some of the missionaries and evangelists and deacons who are out, gung ho about caring for orphans and widows are functionally creating new orphans and widows by abandoning their own wife and kids at home. And so I think something similar could very much be said about mass immigration, for example. When there's no orderly process of processing people and making sure that the people that want to immigrate here actually want to join our America and actually want to be part of our nation and want to share our values. There's no orderly process. You absolutely are. You're orphaning and widowing your own neighbors and the people that you have a higher responsibility to because they're your neighbors.
Yeah, there's a great Dickens novel, and I think in you guys' sphere you don't like Charles Dickens, but I do. But,
boy, here we go. Here we go.
But there's a book, Bleak House. Of course, it's really long, like all his books. But there's a woman called Mrs. Jellyby. And sometimes I call it Jellybyism because what she did is she had all these children, but she only cared about the kids in Africa. So she spent her entire time collecting money for Africa while her kids lived in squalor. And so I call it kind of Jellybyism, where I think Christians can, I don't think they practice this, but they do speak like this. They make, in a way, grace destroy nature. Mm-hmm. And the nature would just be that, hey, you have a household, your household has needs, and your first duty is there. But we have this sort of radical hospitality idea that would seem to require us to force suffering upon our own family in order to help others. Now, very few people actually do that, and but that's kind of the rhetoric that you hear.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That, I mean, this is the way I use it, and people don't like this, but the way I use it is you generate a surplus. You surplus meaning you've met the family needs, you've met what your family needs to live well, and then you use that surplus for people generously. Instead of hoarding the wealth, instead of buying something you don't actually need, you use that to then be generous to those around you. Yeah. And it's a sort of surplus on top of, again, meeting the needs. And I think the same thing with the nation is that nation, it has a sort of surplus in its ability to receive people into it. Yep. So you can think just like how immigration can easily affect wages, or it can affect people getting into higher level jobs. So if you have a brain drain from other countries and you get the best minds and they all come here and it's all great, well, you've also filled positions that your own neighbors, your immediate neighbors, could have filled if they went to college. You essentially, you're bringing competition in the labor market from the outside into your nation. And is that actually loving your nation by actually making it more difficult for people to get certain jobs? Also, it can, like I said, it can suppress wages. So that there's those questions as well. Like, how many people can you receive in without actually harming your immediate neighbor's ability to?
I think Stephen got kicked out of the room for a minute. I think his internet went down.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he'll get back in. It's interesting to me, thinking about how our Constitution, as we're arguing, basically our Constitution is a covenantal document. Right. A city's charter or a county's charter would be that covenantal document. A state's constitution would be the covenantal document, Idaho's and so forth. Mm-hmm. when you talk that way, I instantly want to kind of start thinking like more, man, our documents should be written a little better. for writing like a real covenant. It's a real relationship between, it's people in the state of Idaho, let's say, and that we really should want that Constitution written better because it comes with, blessings of being a good, faithful citizen and so forth. Stephen, did you get everything back there?
Yeah, the camera ran out of batteries, of course, so we have a fresh one in there, so it should work.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, well, we were just commenting on, the way, if you know where to pick back up.
You can finish
you
thought.
can finish where you pick back up.
No, I mean, the point being is that like even a nation has limited resources.
Yeah.
And we should be generous with those resources,
right.
but not to the detriment of our commitment to the good of our nation first over other nations. And so, like you said, it's analogous to the family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's even kind of analogous to your own self. Like you become, like your own person becomes like, if you work yourself to death for others, you're actually no good for anyone eventually.
Right.
Like when you're in the Army, I heard this repeatedly when I was officer in the Army, is that you individual officer, fine, you're supposed to serve your troops and work as hard as you can for their good. But if you work yourself to death, well, then you're no good. You can actually harm them. Let's say you're on a patrol and you're just dead tired because you didn't get any sleep because you've been working the work. You actually can harm people because you didn't take care of yourself. Same thing with nations, same thing with family, same thing with your church, same thing with, so anyway.
Yeah. And I know we're talking kind of different layers of different topics, but like as it regards to, immigration, legal immigration, if you're talking about covenant, an immigrant who wants to come into our nation is coming in to join our covenant,
right?
Our Constitution, our way of life. So not only are you agreeing to, let's say, join our nation's covenant, but also you're moving, you're in
particular
state in that covenant.
Right.
And so there's absolute, so they're agreeing to it. The problem with illegal immigration is they're agreeing to nothing.
Right.
They're agreeing to do whatever the heck they want. And apparently it's legal for them to even take over apartment complexes, so, we want the terms and conditions of the covenant to be written down. And when people, let's say, want to legally migrate to our country, well, this is what they're agreeing to.
Right. I wonder, Stephen, so part of my concern is in this reaction to this, globalism, this multiculturalism, this humanistic, we're going to manufacture, some kind of perfect humanity and, eat your bugs, sort of thing. There's a bunch of, people, a lot of men, a lot of white men, responding to this and sort of, blackpilling, and saying, we've been mistreated, we've been screwed, and in a sense, sort of, then running headlong into a kind of blood and soil, though. Like I'm gonna
that's the highest good.
Yeah, and so my concern is that I think they're reacting to something like, I get it, like it's absolutely true that these multicultural globalists are trying to destroy the Christian West. They're trying to destroy the blessings that God has bestowed upon his people in the West. And at the same time, what I want to say is, but the blessings that we got from God in the West are covenantal blessings, not racial blessings.
Yeah.
They're blessings. It happens that, many of us had light colored skin. Fine. True enough. Many of us lived in the Northern Hemisphere. True enough. But it was God's kindness, and it was a whole lot of Christians. It was a Protestant work ethic. It was a Protestant, political theology. It was Protestant, theology driving a lot of modern science and technology and economics and exploration. And it was people thinking, I would say broadly, in terms of a kind of Protestant covenant theology. And so maybe my concern, and what I'm curious to hear from you on, is, so as a lot of young angry men are sort of responding to being screwed. I want to offer them the answer, but the answer isn't race. The answer isn't blood. The answer is covenant. The answer is, which connects you to a people. It does connect you to places. It connects you to families and tribes. But I think it's a slightly different center. And I think it's a far more potent center. And I'm curious, I know you're seeing this too. I know. And do you see the danger? Are you seeing that the overcorrection into sort of racialism? And isn't covenant a better center than just pure blood and soil?
So yeah, I do see what I think is happening is there's a lot of guys who are maybe 30, 35 and younger, kind of raised on the internet in a way. So they've had, which is not necessarily bad. It's bad in a lot of ways, but it also means that they've had easy source of alternative information, and which is, I think, also a good thing in some ways. And
we agree.
yeah, right. So, yeah, but I also would say that many of them are sort of unmoored from their own American tradition. And all they see is that they've been essentially attacked and that discriminated against, and then they're said that they're told they're actually not being discriminated against. That being anti-white isn't a real thing, or if it is a real thing, then it's actually good. And so they're trying to find, and then they start beginning to think that the narrative around World War II, at the very least, has been destructive, which I would actually agree with in a way. But then they go all the way to the Hitler meme stuff. Right. And what I always what I've told them, and I've said many times, is that, like, if you want to be based, you can just look in our own history to be based. I think if, you don't need to, I'm always kind of curious as to why people find the need to start defending Nazis, or defending the Nazi regime and Hitler, especially since you're an American. I mean, there's just I just don't know why you're personally interested in that. If you want to defend someone, you could defend, all sorts of people from American history if you need to. It shouldn't be your main concern. I understand the concern around World War II. I get that. I just don't think it requires you to then say, well, actually, Hitler had a good point in this and that and all that. So I just don't think it's necessary. You can find your own people in your own tradition to do that. But I also think that what they're recognizing is that there's this radical change going on, and that they're in a way the enemies of that. I mean, there's a sense in which white folks in America are like the villain in every single story of our history, and yet it's people have these, their ancestors have lived here forever. Many people going all the way back into the 17th century, and so they're reacting to that. And I think it's proper to affirm their at least their concerns, and also their passion as well. So if they want, like me, I don't want my kids to live, as bad as the 80s and 90s were. I mean, I'd rather my kids live then than now. And so I think there's a deep concern. I also do think they're just, I don't know about them. I don't know who I'm saying, actually them, sure. But I do think, I just don't know if the idea of covenant's going to get us there, because even in the American project, I'm trying to think of other people. When you talk to someone from Europe and they're Christian, they're not going to understand what this covenant is the same as we would. They're going to be, as many people say, they're going to be statists. They're going to be more about redistribution, high taxation, government services. And that's just a way of life. And actually, if you bring up our perspective on these things, it's bewildering to them. They don't understand it. That's just the European thing. And I actually think that of the blessings of America it is Protestantism. I believe that it is Christianity, but it's also the unique experiences of Anglos or the Anglo-Scottish or whatever experience in the 17th and 18th and even 19th centuries that actually produced the type of ordered liberty, self-government, self-determination that we, that's in our, political lexicon. And I think that was very particularly determined. And a lot of that stuff just would not resonate with, I think, most Christians around the world. And this is actually my pushback against some of the racialism stuff. In terms of immigration, I wouldn't want your average European to immigrate either. So, because the European would show up and they'd vote for Democrats. They're white and they'd come over here and they'd vote for Democrats. And I think that'd be destructive. So,
but I think
so I don't think it's proper to do along racial lines.
Yeah.
And,
Stephen, if I can interject here a little bit, it seems to me, though, I guess as a demonstration of our point, is that the multiculturalism that formed in the 1700s and 1800s worked because they were coming to an agreeable covenant. Like that's, people immigrated from Scotland, Ireland, UK, came to America. There was a form of multiculturalism that developed over the 1800s, but it worked because they were coming into a like-minded covenant, which ultimately grew into the Constitution. As opposed to now, the multiculturalism we have here is a pagan chaos, and they aren't agreeing to any form of covenant except for the whole play is power. Does that?
I guess, and maybe to piggyback on that is like, I also think back to like, again, the 16th century, 17th century during the Reformation. Weren't they in a similar situation? Like, did anybody in France understand covenant? Did people in England understand covenant initially? I don't know that. I think they had maybe this sort of, I refer to this as sort of a Protestant feudalism. I kind of want, and so maybe there's this sort of vague notion of agreements and contracts and the common law, that had been slowly kind of percolating through, Western Europe, Central Europe, and the United Kingdom. But there was a lot of work being done just by the reformers, Calvin, Luther, Knox, others who are actually just like part of their preaching is, they're called the magisterial reformers because they were concerned with the reformation of the magistracy, the magistrates, the nations.
And then later Abraham Kuyper.
Pushing back against, this overweening Roman Catholic Church, and the abuse of civil power. And so there's a lot of education going on saying this is how, God has established nations. There are some basic prerequisites, that you have to answer to the Creator for, whether you realize this or not. This is where, you have, what's the book called? Vindicii contra tyrannus. This French, pseudonymous, author who's writing, in France, explaining the basic grounds by which a king rules and the people are ruled, and basic covenant requirements between the people and the ruler under God. And so there's a lot of education that has to take place. That's part of the ministry of the church, missionaries, teachers, schools. But I think it's like, haven't we been there before? I guess is my point. Like, haven't we been in that place before where nobody understood covenant? And yet that's how we got to America, was a whole bunch of people basically spent their lives preaching the practical ramifications of covenant.
I'd have to think about that. I'm not entirely sure. I wish Glenn Moots were here because he would have a better answer for these. Because the way I understand what culminated in the Constitution was it was Protestantism, like the principles of Protestantism unfolding through experience. So in New England, the Congregationalists, told the Baptists they can't have churches. This is the 17th century. And then in the early 18th century, they said, okay, fine, you can have a church in Boston. And then Cotton Mather preaches the ordination sermon for a Baptist minister in Boston, which is kind of a big event that a lot of historians don't actually talk about much. But it's kind of a big event given the fact that Cotton Mather's own father was once someone with Samuel Willard, actually kind of suppressed the Baptists and started their own churches. Anyway, the point being is that they were able to affirm each other as mutual brothers in Christ under good Protestant principle, because we don't believe that you're in Christ because you belong to a global ecclesiastical institution, and, baptized by their priests and all that. So they were able to say as Protestants we're fellow brethren. And that, I think, was the way to permit a Protestant nation to unfold and culminate in the Constitution. But I think it wasn't so much like realizing a type of covenant. It was the common struggles. There was also ancestry involved as well, since most were British Protestants. And they also fought in the Revolution together. Many of them knew each other very well from the various dealings from the Continental Congress. And so there was, even though they were very much separate colonies for the entire history up until the 1780s, they fought in this common struggle. And that's what John Jay appealed to. George Washington appealed to it. And so it was actually those very particular historical things that brought the country together. And there are other dynamics as well we could go into, but that seems to me to be more important for the formation of the country, than a covenant idea. I have to think about it more. I know what you guys are saying. I think the way that I think about politics in my own, maybe it's idiosyncratic. I'm just not sure how to register exactly the notion of how it fits with what I'm saying, with the development of a nation in history over time through common struggles and traditions and that sort of thing.
That's fair. No, it's totally fair. And I totally appreciate your honesty. What do you think just theologically? I'm just thinking, just zoom out a little bit. Theologically, would you affirm though that, God does, bless or judge nations broadly, based on, some kind of basic, moral principles embedded in the universe, which we would describe theologically as covenantal principles, wouldn't we?
I don't know if it's this thing is I don't know if it's covenantal, because I'd want to say it's natural law, and I'm not sure how that fits with natural law. I guess that's one reason why I'm not really sure. But I do believe there are blessings and cursings in the way that nations as collective entities will obey God. And so I think the chief duty of a nation is to support the work of the ministry of the church. Right. And so that's the chief duty. And so to be blessed as a nation ordinarily would require not just the good order so that you can work and serve your neighbor kind of horizontally, but that it actually supports itself and promotes the true worship of God in Christ. Right. So I fully agree with that. And if you want to, if you want to call that a covenant, I think that makes sense. I'll have to try to think about it, but I think perhaps we're saying the same things, but just using different terminology. Yeah. I've said that probably 3 times now, but
I appreciate that.
No, but it's very interesting, because I think that this is a discussion we have to have, especially when we use different language and try to bring it together and understand each other.
Glenn Moots, in his book, which I mentioned earlier,
you got 2 minutes, Toby.
Politics Reformed is the name of the book, and recommend it if you're listening to this, watching this, and want to learn more. I think it's a really helpful work on this. Maybe we can have him on again sometime soon. And you guys had him on once. I think we did. I think I missed him. Yeah. I think I might have been out walking my dog. But he actually says in that book that sort of basic covenant structure. He says that the Scottish Covenanters worked this out because they wanted to include everyone, and they actually did a lot of work on the covenant of works, or the covenant of creation. And he actually, it's kind of almost a side note. He doesn't spend a lot of time on it. It's really intriguing to me, but it wasn't, he says, if I understood him correctly, it wasn't primarily a theological point initially. to recover covenant of works and covenant of creation. But it was actually a political, sort of unearthing that said, this is the covenant of creation, which means it applies to everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe, whoever those guys were, I don't remember their names off the top of my head. Maybe that's the place where our two different sets of language, Stephen, maybe it converges there. In the covenant of creation, and a lot of natural law guys also appeal to the Noahic covenant as being another one that's, universal. But anyways, totally.
That's not me, by the way. I don't do that.
Okay. Yeah. We
Not that sort.
You're too based for that. Totally appreciate your time, man. I don't know if you want to have any last word. We got to run here in a second, but any last things you want to say before we sign off?
Not really. Just thanks for having me on. I enjoy the discussion, and it's been thoughtful, and I have a lot to think on.
Cool. Anything you're writing on? Anything you want to let people know about? Website, whatever.
I've been doing some more podcasting. I just kind of do a morning show on news. It's Lone Bulwark, and then also on YouTube I've been doing videos on there. Lone Bulwark with Stephen Wolfe, and that's about it. So exciting things happening, but we'll have to announce them in a few months.
You want to spell that? What?
Lone Bulwark.
Lone Bulwark, okay. Yeah. So the Lone Bulwark.
I heard Wimblework.
L-W-A-R-K. Yeah, the Lone Bulwark. Yeah. Well, that's where you find it all. I just did one on theonomy that I like.
Check that one out.
We talk about that next time.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We didn't even talk about theonomy.
I know. Tweet us anytime you want to come on the show, Stephen. Just tweet us and we'll get you on.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow. Got some fun shows happening this week. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. And I made it.
You made it.
I made it.
This is Cross Politics.